What I feel I have seen is that I do feel like there is a portrayal of black women in the mainstream that is overtly sexualised.
It's a very small world. It's been normalised that misogyny and bullying are taking place in the industry all the time. When I first started singing, at one of my very early auditions, I was told that I was going to have to wait for somebody to get pregnant or die before I would get any work. I later gave a performance at which a man was attending who was in a position of power, and I was doing a solo, and I was really pleased because I thought I might get some work out of it. And he asked me if I'd performed a sex act on the conductor in order to get the solo.
What we found in regards to reporting and speaking about it is that most of the people that we speak with do confide in friends and family. And only a few people, 28% or 29%, actually make an official report.
So this sort of sets the tone as to what's going on. And I mean, when you're starting out in your 20s, and that's what is normal, it becomes very difficult to challenge it because everybody's laughing about it and you find yourself laughing along. And then you're complicit, and suddenly it becomes impossible to speak out.
And I think another reason why people don't speak out, especially in the more pop-leaning side of things, is that you might well be tied into a several-album contract with your label. And if you make a fuss now and you still owe them 3 records to come, you don't know what that process is going to be like. You might not get the funding to make the record. You might not get the promotion that you deserve for it either.
I did put a call out to other women working in the classical music industry, mostly singers. And I got a lot of responses, some of which were very familiar to me, echoing my own experiences. So I think that while it's not spoken about a lot, it doesn't mean at all that it isn't happening.
I think one good example is in 2018, Lily Allen alleged that an executive at her record label had tried to rape her and that she didn't report the attack because she was worried that she would be seen as an unreliable witness. And she said she subsequently turned down an opportunity at BBC Radio 1 because it would have put her in the same room as that man. And she also alleged that the station then punished her for not participating by not giving her next single any airplay.
I do think that people know that it's wrong. They know physical abuse is wrong. They know verbal abuse is wrong. They know that grooming is wrong within those spaces. And we all have an awareness of that in society too. But I think there are other, perhaps quite damaging, perhaps even more so damaging behaviours, maybe psychological abuse that can happen, and certain behaviours and acts that are harder to detect, and they kind of can fall into this grey area at times, especially when perhaps drugs and alcohol are present, and not everybody still engages in alcohol and drugs in the same way that I think people have the impression people did maybe in the 90s or the early 2000s, like, I don't drink and I don't, do all of that. So, and a lot of my friends don't. But I definitely think, again, those kinds of environments that have grey areas are allowing certain people to take advantage over people that they can see are potentially more vulnerable.
What we found in our reporting is that a lot of the abuse tends to happen in studios and live settings as well, gigs, concerts, festivals. A lot of the abuse happens by somebody who's quite close, i.e. a manager or a promoter as well. And there's not really anywhere for people to go or call out. I think one of the aspects of being in that predicament and what I guess we're trying to drive home today is, where do people go when this happens? What's the end goal in terms of, how is the pathways of people being able to see that these perpetrators are going to be brought to justice?
The previous committee heard witnesses say that the music industry had not yet had its Me Too moment. Why do you think that is? Do you think it ever will? And what will it take for that to actually happen in the music industry, Laura?
I think it's important to focus on the fact that within film, Harvey Weinstein's downfall was the result of household name celebrities like Gwyneth Paltrow speaking out against a majorly influential figure and doing so to publications like the New York Times and the New Yorker, which have got the resources and the legal wherewithal to be able to investigate a story like that. And you cannot underestimate the amount of momentum, both celebrity and journalistic and legal, required to make that kind of impact. And I think there have been big individual cases that have led to prosecution or at least major reputational damage. Look at like R. Kelly, Puff Daddy, Tim Westwood. But it's notable in each one of those cases, the allegations had been swarming for years and years before they were properly investigated, which I think is also very easy to link to the fact that the alleged victims were predominantly young black women. And I think you have to think about whose experiences are valued, what the so-called perfect victim looks like, and how that squares against what is likely a very, very low benefit of speaking out in the first place.
There are known perpetrators in the classical music industry who everybody knows that it's happening. And I mean, I had a woman write in describing an experience. I don't work with this woman, she's not a singer, but I was able to exactly pinpoint who she was talking about because she'd done exactly the same thing to me. And so if there, at the moment there is no incentive for these people not to behave like that, nobody's holding them to account, there's no way of getting justice. As you say, you risk being sued if you start speaking out about people, and it's very difficult to know how to avoid these situations and how to educate. So I think education is an excellent idea because these people don't know how to behave.
Let's say the Cassie Ventura case against Sean Diddy Combs, it took for us to see a video to believe her. When I think people need to be believed immediately. That was her words. They should have believed me the first time around.
Without giving any identifying details, are you aware of anyone in the music industry that's been pressured into signing a non-disclosure or NDA agreement to prevent them talking about their experience of sexual misconduct or discrimination?
Yes, I'm aware of several people who have signed NDAs to that nature.
Several have signed them. Are you aware of that being a more widespread sort of ask? Has everybody that you're aware has been asked to sign them? Have they all signed them or have some refused?
I can't speak to the specificities of it, but I know that they are used in a very widespread way.
NDAs ethically depend on the context and how they're implemented, but right now it allows the powerful people to bully, to stifle and block the truth from being known.
I think something that's important to add to that is some powerful individuals that have the confidence to know that they could potentially stifle you even without having you signed an NDA. They will exercise the use of the power that they hold in whatever way that they can. I've heard of girls being told either to cover up because they don't look sophisticated enough if parts of their body are showing, and then I've heard it on the other hand where people are given certain items of clothing by a stylist that's somewhat under the influence of people in a position of power around them, or perhaps people that may be funding some of that public appearance, and they're not feeling very comfortable or content with the options that they're given because they feel maybe it's showing their body in a way they don't feel comfortable with.
The word sexy probably wouldn't appear on a schedule, but I have worked for choirs where they specify that they prefer us to have a V-neck, which I find odd. And the thing about being asked to cover up, actually, not being allowed to have bare shoulders is something that comes up. I've also been asked by a man not to cross my legs, which, again, is not acceptable, is it?
Black women in music in particular are over-sexualised. So when we look at the data, it said 42% of women, all women, felt pressure to change their appearance to become more sexual. If people on their mobile phones, kids on their mobile phones are constantly bombarded with sexual images of black women looking this way, what do you think is going to happen? Our data, the Musicians Union data, the Musicians Union census, and Help Musicians data says black women are the most are bullied and sexually harassed more than any other people group. So there's a correlation. We're seeing something here.
I do think that there is a toxic expectation around black women's bodies, which over time has kind of progressed into women having to take potentially dangerous and invasive surgical procedures or extreme beauty trends to achieve this image. And then perhaps also what I can imagine is what seeps in is this idea that you have ambition and there's something that you want, but you are not able to reach it unless you kind of take on some of this form that you're seeing so commonly. I think in regard to myself, I've always kind of taken a decision that if I'm to show my body in a way which feels sexualized, that it is my choice. And I do feel I have been affected by social media actually within this, and I do think this has kind of affected my view and my gaze over myself of perhaps how I should dress. But I don't actually know within my own case whether that's encouraged by my peers or whether that is encouraged by even my fan base. I don't see more reaction in my fan base if I show more skin. I actually get less. So I think it kind of, it's really dependent on the individual, but I would say generally I do see and feel that black women are in a position where there are expectations that are permeating of their expression past just their physical appearance. And I do think it's limiting what black artists feel they can do. And I think that's a shame because it's a voice that's very important in our society.